Why are you trying to run Photoshop on Linux? Just use GIMP. This quote, but also similar ones, is something that you often see when a newcomer is trying to run a specific program on Linux. I myself have often been asked on why I don't use the free and open source video editor Kdenlive instead of hassling around with DaVinci Resolve. Having proprietary software on Linux is a thought that not everyone is comfortable with, since they are not the best in privacy-related matters, no one can fix issues that the developer is unwilling to, and they also take away the market share of other open source initiatives. But is all of that actually true? In today's video, we're going to talk about proprietary software on Linux, the good and bad things that come from it, and why I generally think that it's not really a threat to the desktop experience, but rather holds the key to improve the experience for everyone. And let's get straight into it. So, straight off the bat, I don't really think that proprietary software is a bad thing on paper. If you find a solution to a problem and sell it to pay your own bills, then that's fine for me, from a moral standpoint. Open source software is the best kind of software when it comes to collaboration, finding bugs and security flaws, but there is no real way to maintain it without working on the side unless you develop something that works exceptionally well and becomes crucial to a marketable appliance. Like corporations providing funding and resources to maintain the Linux kernel for cloud platforms, for example. The blessing, but also curse of open source is that if you try to sell your product, then someone can just fork it and distribute it for free. Perfect for everyone else, quite bad for the maintainer. So it's no surprise that most software solutions, especially those who are extremely successful, don't provide anything open source. But that doesn't mean that the product itself is bad and shouldn't be available on Linux. Like, I'm someone who appreciates a choice. When I moved from Windows to Linux, it wasn't to get away from Microsoft's choices or software. It was just an option out of curiosity. And I think that many confuse these options with having to use a certain piece of software. For example, if Adobe were to release Photoshop or Premiere natively on Linux, I still wouldn't use it, but it would be nice to have that option. If Microsoft Office were to come to Linux, sure, would be nice. But if I don't want to pay for it or get it somewhere else, then I don't have to use it. I guess that some are scared that if proprietary solutions become available on Linux, that less people would consider using open source alternatives. And while there might be a certain truth to that, that's just really a marketing problem. A student who needs to cut down the video a bit, not actually edit it with fancy effects or anything, they don't need Resolve or Premiere for that. Since Kdenlive is an open source project and everyone can contribute, we can take it into our own hands to inform them about its capabilities. But if there are certain limitations that they just cannot get around, then they are not going to use it anyway. Like, more people on Linux is not going to make them use different solutions, or at least not if they use them somewhat professionally. LibreOffice, for example, is available on Windows, but many still resort to pirating Office instead. But it's not just the choices in software, but also firmware and hardware support. On Linux I use Piper to configure my mouse, and even if Logitech G-Hub became available, for just my mouse I wouldn't really bother with it, since I used it so rarely in the past that it always needed to update every time I opened it. But if I had like a new mouse with a new sensor and controller, then I couldn't use it on Linux because G-Hub is not available here. Now, would I prefer Logitech's proprietary software in comparison to Piper? No, not at all. But it would be nice to have that option. The main difference for me, particularly on Linux, is that proprietary software runs mostly on just the application layer. Like, I'm not forced to turn off a ton of toggles, edit registry entries or use custom scripts just to turn off tracking. But I can still have the option to access an application that might utilize something like that itself. And Linux is unfortunately also not really the cleanest. While it is remarkable on how many devices you can install Linux, it doesn't work on every system without a proprietary driver. Telling someone who is a professional that they shouldn't use Photoshop but rather use GIMP instead is like saying that users should use Nouveau instead of the proprietary NVIDIA driver. Sure, for a lot of people that just do web browsing, stream videos and similar, it's enough. But gaming or CUDA support is still very poor or non-existent altogether. The point is, options. And let's be real, it's gonna be complicated anyway. Having proprietary software on Linux does not automatically mean that they're integrated into the distributions and software stores. No. For me personally, nothing would really change, except I could get a cheaper capture card from Elgato. I would still use OBS for recordings, DaVinci Resolve for editing, GIMP for making my thumbnails, and so on. I wouldn't support Adobe because I find their solutions massively overpriced, and I wouldn't try to get them to run otherwise, because why would I? Like, I'm repeating myself again and again. I don't think that having support from proprietary software vendors is that bad of a thing. Quite the contrary, actually. Many programs would probably see a lot of community support, and if your margins come from an external source anyway, then why not let others contribute if they want to? Now, what is definitely not the right thing to do is to just make your source code available with a license that prevents modifications or forks, since this would just end in a bad image and more pirated copies anyway. I generally don't want proprietary software on Linux if I had the choice, but I still want to have the option to install it if I really needed it. And that's frankly it. A rock-solid base that is under your control, and everything else should be optionally usable if you think about it in this particular context. And I don't find it wrong. My general recommendation is of course to always give open source a shot and support the projects if you can. But if there just isn't anything around that suits your use case, then you also shouldn't really feel bad for relying on a proprietary solution instead. I just want everyone to have a choice, make their decisions and be happy with them. And that's where I'll leave it. So what do you think of proprietary software on Linux? Do you think that Microsoft or Adobe should make their products available on Linux or just stick to Windows? Please let us know in the comments down below. Before I end this video, I quickly wanted to mention that if you want to support the channel, make even better videos, then please feel free to check out our membership program as well as our online shop, whereas each sale helps to support various open source projects. If you've liked this video, then please make sure to show it with a like, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any future Linux videos. I really want to thank you for watching this video, and all that's left to say now is good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I'll see you around.